Hey DJ, play that music.
Another week.
Hi, Donny.
Hello. Another week navigating our shenanigans, everyone. Welcome back to Restitching the Tapestry. As of this recording, it is April 1st, 2026. April Fool's Day. It's fun. Like, despite it being April Fool's Day, I've not fallen into any jokes today, thankfully.
I think that there's so much going on in the world that there's just no room for jokes. I heard a lot of people being like, if you joke about the president being dead, I will cut you.
Right. Well, yeah. Like the gravity of right now, like any jokes would just absolutely be in poor taste, right? So, well, Ari, how have you been? What have you been up to?
I went to yoga today. I have been just hopping, shucking and jiving, just doing the thing. I don't know. I've been moved into my parents' house. I hung out stuff on the wall.
Yes.
You see the pride chakra.
I sure do. I love it.
I always have to have that in the background because that is like my favorite. It's like my little secret pride flag.
I should have a pride flag. I don't have one though in my background yet.
You have a Godzilla pride flag.
I would love a Godzilla pride flag. I would love a Mothra pride flag. That would be.
Oh, I should find you a Godzilla pride flag and like just like a little one, like a little
just a little
one that Godzilla can hold or something.
Godzilla supports trans people. Rawr.
Yeah, I say so. That's a good one.
Well, so speaking of which, yesterday, I mean, I know this is kind of treading into the current event snapshot early, but did you do anything to celebrate Trans Day of Visibility? That was yesterday, I think.
I existed and I said, here I am. I'm non-binary, I'm bisexual, and I exist.
I made sure to read some things. I signed a couple of petitions, and I just celebrated the lovely people in my life who are in the community. So yeah.
I pushed an old lady down and I was like, get out of my way,
Get out of my way. Get out of my way. It's Trans Day of Visibility.
I kicked some dirt in J.K. Rowling's face.
What have I been up to? I've been writing, Ari.
You've been writing?
I've been writing. I'm writing. Well, I'm currently outlining a piece of fiction, actually. I know. I'm not going to spoil anything because I'm really excited about it.
Fiction, or is it like short form fiction?
It is a full-on novel.
That's like Red Alert.
I know. I'm really excited. So I hope that I continue my trajectory, and I think it's going to work out. So beyond that, though, this week I've not been doing much else other than like working, getting stuff done. We painted our basement. That was exciting this past weekend. So we did our own mold remediation of our basement.
I was wondering about that, if you got that taken care of yet.
Yeah, we were going to have professionals do it, but it would have been like a wild cost. So we did research and we did our own. Not saying this is what everybody should do, but financially speaking, that is what we needed to do.
Yeah.
So, yeah, those things, like those house related things, are like asininely expensive. So I'm just like, I don't know how people do it. I really don't.
As long as you got it taken care of, where it comes from doesn't matter.
Yes. And as far as I'm aware, we did it correctly. So that is a good thing. So anything else exciting going on in your life?
I talked to my boyfriend.
Oh, how
I
is
should be seeing him.
he?
He said, I said, am I going to see you this weekend? He said, I hope so.
Oh, love, love, love. I love love.
I've been talking good about him on the internet. I wrote a post about him on Reddit that he's just the cutest guy and that I like him so much. And I was bragging about him because he's a Libra. He's a Libra sun, Leo moon, and Scorpio rising. So we share a Scorpio rising together. And
Oh.
I was like, but we have complementary Venus signs. He has a Scorpio Venus sign, and I have a Pisces Venus sign, and apparently those are
Mm.
like extremely complementary, like very deeply complementary.
Oh. I do find like horoscope readings interesting, like when you look at like your full breakdown. And not everybody believes in this stuff. I like it because I remember when we spent like years in college doing readings and like looking at
The
looking
first
at charts.
one of our first dates, I read his cards, and this is how much he likes me. He has already told me his birthplace and birth time, so I could do a chart on him.
That is some commitment so far.
I
I
I
don't even
dated
think
a
my
guy
husband
for
and I have
not
done that.
I dated a guy for 9 months, and he refused to give me his birth time because he said that he was like, "That's a trap. That's a trap."
Oh my goodness. I just think of it as like interesting context. It can be interpreted in so many different ways, but like, and let me tell you, like, I made money doing readings in college. That's how I paid off my textbook costs. And it was good because you get to learn about people and you get to know them. So, but anyway, are we ready for the mission statement?
Yes.
All right, it is my turn. We live in a dynamic society where social media shapes us by creating greater opportunities for connection. It has led to a developing understanding of the adversity many marginalized communities face, the powers causing the adversity, and those who act as bystanders as atrocities take place in real time. Our goal with this show is to make connections and have challenging conversations about social topics, current events, pop culture, and art. Together, let's weave the threads of understanding with what privilege we have in order to learn, educate, and create in a world that's growing.
I'm thinking about today's topic, and I'm thinking about how we're going to fit media literacy into that, and it's very
Mhm.
interesting how it's going to fit.
Yeah, and we're gonna definitely kind of like bring it all in full circle at the end of the episode for sure, because I really do think media literacy is such a powerful tool and a crucial one, especially now of all times. But before we get into that exciting topic, let's do our current event snapshot. So it's 2026. Per the usual, we have several things to talk about because what are you gonna do?
Current administration.
So Ari, what do we got first?
Well, so I don't know what it is. It'll be just like some random time. I was going to bed last night, and Trump was like, I was just because I was about to do the Wordle on New York Times, and I was like, let me just check the headlines. And it was like, Trump was like, oh, we're going to pull out of Iran. And I was like, is this a April Fool's joke? Is he like messing with us by
I
like,
saw that too. Well, and I've seen people getting really frustrated because he keeps saying one thing and then backtracking and then saying something else and then backtracking. It's like, what lane are we picking? Like, what are we doing?
I feel like it's an April Fool's joke. Like he's like messing with us, or he's manipulating the markets right now so he can do insider
Mhm.
trading.
I wouldn't be surprised. And I mean, as problematic as he is, he does possess a lot of rhetorical power because he literally has an entire group of people who very much just believe anything he says or does, regardless the outcome, regardless the damage that it causes, right? So, um, No, it's like I saw that too, and I was just like skeptical. I was like, okay, what?
That goes back, people believing him goes back to the days of when he was running for president the first time, that CNN and all these news media outlets would play his speeches unedited without fact checkers,
Mm-hmm.
and they would just let him run his speeches.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, so people believed everything he said because they would just like run his speeches.
Yeah, and it begs the question, like, is that what caused all the damage and the trajectory that we've been on?
Yeah, I think
Right.
it has. I think it has, because when you listen to him unedited, you think that he is like at face value. Because when somebody's just talking to you, you don't have someone in your ear going, especially if you don't have media literacy,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to hear somebody just saying like a bunch of nonsense. Like people who don't have BS detectors and go, this person is lying to me. People who don't have good lie detectors and go,
Or even begging the question, is this person lying? Right? Like,
yeah,
even just asking that introductory question is so important.
like the average American doesn't have the ability to discern what is true and what is false, they because the average American has a 6th grade reading level.
Mhm, yeah, and that's been widely talked about, especially since the pandemic, because the pandemic exasperated that significantly. So, now a lot to unpack, and I think that will definitely tie into our conversation of media literacy here in a bit too. So, what else do we have on our list?
So I was reading this. So I was reading the Free Press, and they were talking about how Penn University uh, is kind of upset. I think a lot of universities are upset, but Penn University specifically is upset because the government, like the FBI, was asking for a list of names of Jewish faculty members.
Didn't it ask for students too?
I'm not sure if it was students, but they were just asking for a list of I think it was faculty members that it was just asking
Mm,
for, but I didn't read the article too closely about, but they were asking for a list of names of Jewish
mm.
faculty members, and they were like, "We don't keep records of that."
Yeah, which is concerning. Like, that is very uncomfortable for,
Well,
like.
because it starts with just one group of marginalized people, and then who else do they start asking for? And,
Mhm.
like, why are
And
they
then
asking
what do they do with that information?
what are they doing with that
Mm,
information? That's what they're saying. What do you plan on doing with that information? And they said, "Oh, we're using it for an investigation." And they said, "Okay, but it seems as though we could be the targets of, you know, um, discrimination and other
mhm.
sorts of uh, unequal opportunities, that you could be unequally targeting us in ways that." And because it starts with one group of people, and then
Mhm.
if nobody stands up for them, then another group of people will be targeted, and then
Yeah.
another group will be
It's like
targeted.
literally becomes like an avalanche of just. I mean, granted, I would argue that we've already been experiencing an avalanche of atrocities, but that's just yet another example of such, right?
But it's very concerning when they're asking for lists of names of groups of people, and
Mhm.
then mm, they're saying that they're using it for certain things, but not be clear about what they're using it for.
I will say that a lot of us in higher ed have been really worried about this type of thing. And I think in the back of our minds, we've just had like this what if scenario playing out. So, and then the truth is, like in this political landscape, higher education, well, all education, but especially higher education has been like under constant threat on multiple different fronts. So, and I do think it's going to be like been damage already, and I think it's going to take years to recover from that damage. So, we already talked about trans day visibility. That was yesterday.
Mhm.
But something just as like something really disturbing happened yesterday. Um, and you cannot tell me that it wasn't calculated that it was also on Trans Day of Visibility. But the Supreme Court reversed Colorado's ban on conversion therapy.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, based on, and I think we talked about it, and maybe I did a video about it. I don't know if we did an episode about it.
I think we chatted about it in or maybe I sent you an article in Messenger.
Well, because I remember this process started last year because there, like, when it was made known that the Supreme Court would be looking at this case, like, it obviously really concerned a lot of people.
I know we talked about it at least at one point. So
Yeah, we did, I'm fairly sure. But, like, this court case was based around, a therapist in Colorado who wanted to use talk therapy, which is a form of conversion therapy, used on LGBTQ plus populations to essentially convince them that they are not, in fact, LGBTQ plus. And the court just basically determined that it was okay to do that.
because they said that in order to ban it, it was against his First Amendment rights, which is crap.
Right. Yeah.
Because it impedes on the rights of others. Like, because you have to think about like minors and you have to think about like people who go to these therapies against their will.
Every reputable medical establishment in this country recognizes conversion therapy as just as terrible and acknowledges it as abusive, harmful. So like them reversing this ban sets a really concerning precedent, especially with the other, I think, 19 or 20 states that also have bans too. Because what does that tell them? That gives them like the out on, oh, we can do the same. We can follow suit. We just have to mobilize our own efforts to reverse it, right? So definitely a blow to the LGBTQ plus community for sure. And I really just hope that, I don't know, I hope that somehow they relook at this case and determine that the decision was just a bad decision.
I'm just hoping that the Trevor Project keeps fighting and that they bring it up to the Supreme Court again. And
Yeah,
that
there are a number of organizations like the Trevor Project, PFLAG National has also been fighting. The ACLU has been fighting. I do think they're going to fight this for sure.
because
1000%.
it's like most things, you bring it up once and it'll go
Mhm.
a certain way, and then if you find another case, that another circumstance in which they can go from some other angle and try it again.
Right. And because I often will get people who will say, like, Donnie, you guys have marriage equality and, some rights in some states. Isn't that enough? And I'm like, no, it's not enough. Look what's happening to the trans community left and right? And in multiple states. And the truth is,
Because it's not guaranteed, because there's always people who are fighting against it.
yes, what peace of mind is there? Like, we get rights for one set of 4 years. A new administration comes in, promotes Supreme Court justices, whatever, and that can just get reversed in like just a quick, flick of a pen, right? So yeah, I like if anybody wants to understand the reality of like why we're always cautious, that is why we're always cautious, right? Well, the last thing on the current event snapshot, Ari, I don't know if you saw this.
I
Did
did,
you hear
and I saw
about
the pictures too.
Kristi Noem's husband gets caught in a bimbofication kink scandal? What are your thoughts?
I saw the picture.
The pictures, Ari. The picture.
I just wonder if he was wearing Kristi Noem's clothes in for the bimbofication, or if he paid the $25,000 in order to get the clothes from the prostitute.
All I know is that every LGBTQ plus person I know has been laughing out loud at this, especially considering how our community has been attacked for so many different reasons associated with like outward appearance and representation. So it's
Like
like,
the trans
okay.
community just transition to like
Well, and of course now Kristi Noem's like, my family needs time. Our family's been rocked by this realization, and I'm just like,
girl, you knew.
girl, like,
How do you
listen,
not know your husband is dressing up like a slutty little
listen.
girl?
What do we like? Are you that out of touch with your own relationship that like, what are we doing? What?
There is no way he didn't dress up like a slutty woman in the bedroom.
Well, and it's interesting because I saw like so many interesting commentaries, especially from activists about him doing this as a manifestation of his like internalized misogyny, or
Mm.
like dressing the way he views women and all of that. And I think it's interesting that, like how everybody has been blaming drag queens for everything. It's like, oh, well, this isn't a drag queen.
No, it's him acting submissive.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
it's him because he gets off sexually on being submissive.
And mind you, I like, if you have a kink, go for it. As long as it's consensual and you aren't, you know, harming people and it's consensual between two adults, of course, like, who are we to judge? So we're not like kink
Uh,
shaming him.
the only thing I'm judging him is that the thing that he and his wife are doing against a community of people that say that people are like bad people, like
Mhm.
that
And
they're
then
deviants, and that he does like the most deviant behavior.
yeah, it's like it's again, it's a double standard. That's what it always is, right? It's
Yeah.
always a double standard. So, yeah, that's the current event snapshot, everybody. As you can tell, there was a very diverse set of things happening right now. Well, let's talk about media literacy, Ari.
Oh my God.
I'm so excited to talk about media literacy. What the hell is media literacy?
So media literacy is talking about sources of media. It's talking about how accurate the news is that you're reading and the biases of the news that you're reading. It's talking about who is writing the article that you're reading. Um, it's talking about the history of the news story that you're reading. It's talking about just the slant of the article and like just kind of the background of the article, like questioning the relevance of the article and like why that article is being written.
Yep. So in other words, a ton of context unpacking when you were reading something, right? And so we wanted to talk about this because right now we live in a very unique time where I do feel that there's been a significant decline in media literacy considering all of the misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation has been going around. And just to give you an idea of what those mean, we have graphics ready to go, everyone. I hope you're ready for this. But so I like love to show people this graphic because it kind of shows the difference between misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation. And then the two words down here suggest, like, of course, the intent behind these three categories. So misinformation is unintentionally published inaccurate or misleading information. So as an example of that, I might think about like, oh, my aunt who is just maybe reads something and then posts, like maybe reads something inaccurate and then proceeds to post about it, perpetuating that inaccurate information and then thus misleading other people, right? Inadvertently, because my fictional aunt doesn't know that it's actually misinformation, right?
Oh, you know what I saw that was a misinformation on from social media recently where people were lacking media literacy is with the Epstein files. So with the Epstein files, people were talking about the cream cheese baby thing. They said that Epstein ate babies and they tasted like cream cheese. And when you dove into the Epstein files and actually like developed media literacy and started doing the research about what they were talking about, he was in a conversation with a friend of his about trying to find potato babies. And so he was texting on a BlackBerry, so he was shortening it to babies. I'm trying to find babies in New York. And he said, they only have bagels, they don't have babies. And so he said, they millions of cream cheese, but million of cream cheese, but no, and so he was talking about cream cheese babies, which is like a type of potato baby, or it's a type of like food or something. But it's not talking about
But
actual
but
babies.
but people really like it kind of hit the internet like wildfire and people were running with it, right? Which is often the case for misinformation, where like it does gain a certain degree of virality until it is proven wrong, right? And then there is disinformation, which is deliberately fabricated or manipulated information, right? Usually intended to mislead. Sometimes disinformation kind of takes the form of like propaganda too, right? To like rhetorically convince an entire group of people. And then we have malinformation, which is deliberately published sensitive or private information with altered context. I've seen people using AI to perpetuate malinformation.
Yeah, where they show like going back to like Epstein, showing like a picture of like Epstein in like Saudi Arabia or like Dubai or something like that, and he was passed away, and they're like, oh, Epstein's alive, he's in. Or like lately what I've been seeing on TikTok is this this Palm Beach Pete stuff. You know what I'm talking about? They're saying that Palm Beach Pete is Epstein, and that he just changed his face, and that he's just now by this guy who they've never heard of called Palm Beach Pete.
Yeah, so like it's very much like malinformation and hoax related rhetoric. Definitely
Conspiracy theories, yeah.
conspiracy theories are intertwined, and I've seen people using AI to do this because what the way these spread like wildfire is through like garnering a shocked reaction. Like when people are shocked, like being shocked is the first reaction, and then it like transforms into other forms of reaction. Like it turns into anger, it turns into sadness, it turns into rage, right? So with that context in mind, like I just wanted to introduce that along with Ari's definition of media literacy. So let's talk about our own background and history with how we've developed our media literacy. Mind you, my media literacy is always growing. I think everyone's capacity for media literacy is always growing because we are in a media landscape that's itself changing and growing, right? So, Ari, how did your own media literacy develop?
So I definitely as far as like media literacy goes, I definitely lean more left in the types of media that I consume.
Mhm,
So even I have a type of bias when I read news media,
mhm,
um, that I tend to read more left leaning media, just because that is something that I feel more comfortable reading, because right-leaning media tends to be, um, a little bit more forgiving of people that I find to be abhorrent, and
mhm.
they tend to be more propagandized than left-leaning media, because left-leaning media will be a little less forgiving of even the people on their own side, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But so that's my bias, that I tend to consume more left-leaning media. But I developed my media literacy through my journalism degree and then my English master's degree.
Mhm.
Not saying that you have to do those things in order to develop media literacy, but I have focused a lot of years on thinking critically about media through a higher education study of media.
Yeah.
So I was taking classes on like what it meant to be a journalist and working as a journalist as a student, and asking questions and writing news articles, and being in the field of a journalist. And so when you work as a journalist, you start to think about like my own biases and how to be more objective as a writer, because you don't want to put your own biases onto the reader.
Yeah.
So
Well, there's
you
such a power in influence, right?
Well, the power of words, using word choices, is something that I have often like even in videos that I make on YouTube, the power of words and the word choices that you make. Like even with this podcast, I will often like, when talking to you, or like even when I'm writing out the questions for the notes, um will think about word choices. And sometimes that's why I use like the most simple language possible, is because I'm
Mhm.
thinking about our audience. And because most people on the internet do not have like a higher reading level than a sixth grade reading level, sometimes like using the most simple language possible and like not using like
Mhm.
elevated language, because I want people to understand. Sometimes I do use like intricate language, uh because I don't know a better way to convey that.
It's because
Uh
you're a nerd, Ari. We're both nerds.
but most of the time I will try to explain things in the most simplistic manner possible, which involves a little bit more of an explanation.
No, I agree with that completely. And I think there's no shame in having to do that, considering the reality of the state of education right now. Like we have to make sure that information is as accessible as possible to multiple groups of people. And to answer the same question too, like my media literacy was developed through um, higher education. Like I have a bachelor's of science degree in English and anthropology, and then I also went on to get a master's in English. And a lot of my focus, I do have a little bit of journalism experience, nowhere near as much as you do, but my focus was on like rhetoric and the art of persuasion and the significance of like the rhetorical situation as a whole, which I'll be talking a little bit about
Ooh.
later. I love the rhetorical situation. My students do not after I'm done talking about it, because then they're exhausted, because it's like, what? But no, so but like when it comes to like my own biases, like of course I am obviously left leaning, but like I think even though we are left leaning, like we do have the critical wherewithal to vet a variety of sources in order to corroborate information, right? And we do have the capability of looking at the range of sources, and especially like journalism sources. So this is another graphic that I wanted to show everyone, because this is one that I often use, and it's one that I show my students as well when it comes to assessing media bias. So this chart regularly gets updated. Um, and it's from Adfontes Media Inc. But this is a media bias chart that has an x-axis and y-axis. Um, like the y-axis being like the value and reliability, the x-axis being like the bias itself and then the direction of the bias. So if you look at this, you can see like all the different networks that fall along.
Which one's all the way over to the right in the corner?
Loomer. I think it looks like it says Loomer.
Is that Laura Loomer's network?
Probably. Probably. But no, like so I remember during the pandemic, I would my family would always get frustrated with me because I like they would be circulating misinformation. I'd be like, "Hey, like did you check the source that you shared?" And then I would sometimes send them this chart to be like, "Hey, here's something helpful so you can, look at the media bias, right?" And sometimes, like, I will get caught up on an article where I'll be like, like, rhetorically speaking, this does sound odd. So, like, let me check out the media bias chart to see where they fall. Now, this does get updated every single year. So, like, if we were on this media bias chart, I probably would say that we would fall into the strong left or skews left category.
Yeah, I would say we skew left. I would say we skew probably farther left, not completely left, because I do think that we do check our sources.
Yeah.
But we tend to skew more left.
What? We do?
I would put us on the same level as like maybe Rachel Maddow.
Yeah. Love Rachel. But no, that's like, and I can put links to these resources below everyone too, so you can check them out. But I always just think that like one first step is definitely kind of like examining that um, media bias. So, but yeah,
So let's start with something more simple, which is literary theory. And I know that sounds like a crazy, like overarching thing, like it plays into media literacy, but literary theory is how does it affect media literacy? And what's the difference between the two of them?
well, first, let's explain what literary theory is for everyone, because it's something really fascinating. So, literary theory is the acknowledgement and the reality that there are many different schools of thought when it comes to analyzing and delving deeper into a text or a source or a piece of media. And the way I describe literary theories to my students is I always tell them, like, think of literary theories as like Instagram filters, right? When you have an image and you take a filter and put it over an image, it enhances and shows you different aspects of that image that may be different than another filter. And thus it helps you learn more about it, right? So, case in point, like if I were to look at an article and read it through the lens of queer theory, right? I might think about as I'm reading it, like, how does this connect to an LGBTQ plus audience? Or how might it, you know, how might it impact the LGBTQ plus community? How would LGBTQ plus readers read and interpret it? Versus like maybe looking at it through a feminist lens. Like that's another literary theory, right? So there's quite a few different literary theories. Ari, is there anything I'm missing you want to add to that?
No, that's perfect. I think that that's a really great way of talking about it as like filters, because and like you don't necessarily have to have the bias that you're filtering it through.
Mm-hmm.
So like
Yeah.
you can be a cis het white male and look at something from queer literary theory. You
Yeah.
can you can be a you can be a queer lesbian woman and look at things from a, literary theory of traditional homestead values, and
Mm-hmm.
be like, how does this affect like, conservative a conservative bias, and be like, how does this affect conservative bias, and be like,
Right.
because looking at it from those angles, I think that that helps us understand each other better,
Yeah.
especially like where they're coming from. Like when we go back to that chart, it shows like where this falls and like why people, because I read a book after the last election about debating like someone from a different political spectrum than you. And one of the biggest things was that you have to think from the other side, that like we have like things that we hold true to ourselves in common, like different certain core values. Like we all want to have certain things that are inalienable rights. Like we all want to live and have a good life and, maintain a certain level of happiness and to be able to survive.
Yeah.
So how we go about it is all different, possibly, but there are certain things that we can all agree upon. It's just how we go about it may be slightly different.
And that's super interesting. And I want to draw out something here as well. So notice so far, everyone, that we've been asking questions, right? When talking about these literary theories. I think that one of the baseline steps that any person can take in developing their media literacy is learning how to ask questions, right? The more questions you ask, the more you're able to puzzle piece things together that you're exposed to, and you can draw connections. You can see where like there may be dead ends, like being able to ask a question and objectively examine something through the lens of that question, which could be beneath that bigger lens of the literary theory. That's going to help you understand how that piece of media or source material is working, the author's intention behind it, the potential audience, the context of like society surrounding maybe when it was published or released, right? There's so many different pieces of information you can derive out of that, and that can help determine the way you interpret what it is you're being exposed to and whether or not you share it,
Yeah,
to share
that's
that
true.
knowledge.
And I think one of the biggest things too is just not accepting everything as like the gospel truth. And that goes into the questioning is like, I understand that you want to trust your media and like have a trust that what they are is telling truth. And
Mhm.
that's like one end of the spectrum, is that you trust everything that this one media source tells you, and everything they tell you is the gospel truth. And so nothing that anyone will ever tell you will ever make you deviate from that one truth. And on the other end of the spectrum is questioning everything that media tells you and becoming a conspiracy theorist that falls into these traps of disinformation and malinformation, and believing when people put out disinformation campaigns and disinformation theories, and like falling under these traps of theories that are always undermining the status quo.
Yeah.
So there's kind of a middle ground where being skeptical of media, but also being skeptical of
Of the
conspiracy theory.
extremes. Yeah, absolutely. No, I think that was an excellent explanation. And so, like, well, we both kind of just answered our next question. So, our next question was, what is the first step to developing media literacy and stopping that delusional and conspiracy thinking, which leads to doom scrolling on social media? So, I would say, like, knowing what questions to ask and having a healthy degree of skepticism that prevent you from falling into either extreme on that spectrum that Ari was that you were just talking about, right?
And knowing that when people post things on things like TikTok or other media sources that aren't traditional media sources, such as like YouTube or TikTok, is that those people don't have the same amount of reputation on the line as like a journalist who makes money doing that for a living.
And who
Like,
has studied for years to be able to do that for a living.
a
Right?
journalist can go to jail and lose their reputation and get sued if they write a bad story.
Mhm.
Somebody who is just posting online bad information, AI stories, things of
Yeah.
that nature do not have the same amount of
They're not held to the same standard.
right, because they're not a
Mhm.
journalist.
Yeah. No, that's another important thing to take into consideration. So here's another thing that I think is another important first step, and that is demonstrating a degree of emotional awareness when you are exposing yourself to sources or social media posts or whatever. So, like, I always tell I do this with my students largely in poetry classes as well, because when you read poetry, like, you have a very distinct reaction with each read that you do. And so I tell students, if they want to follow a super basic reading process, your first read through something should be reading to react so you can process your emotions, but do so in a safe way, you know. The second read through should be the read to interpret. This could be like interpreting, the message. The third read through would then be reading to analyze, which would then be an instance of reading where you might be looking through the lens of one of those literary theories, right? So, like, because we're so used to like skimming everything and just like reacting on the spot, because we are getting so much information every day due to the wonder that is technology, right? Like, because of that, I feel like our emotional thresholds have been really reduced. The pandemic probably did not help with that either. So, like,
Mhm.
when we are going through and exposing ourselves to source material and posts, like, our first instinct is to react and to act on that reaction, which is how a lot of misinformation gets spread.
And the thing about it is you can bookmark a source and come back to it later.
Mhm. Oh,
And that's the thing.
heavens. I do that all the time.
Yeah, it's and the thing is like you scroll on social media. Why would you not look at a news article more than once?
Yeah. Yeah. Or why would you just read like why would you just read the headline and then click away? When the headline, like, you can clearly tell when a headline is designed to create shock.
Mhm.
And if you are unsure about whether a headline is creating shock, like, well, when you read it, think about try to take a moment and be like, okay, I'm in this moment. What is my emotional reaction to this headline? Maybe what words in the headline are eliciting this reaction, right? Why
I
is
think
that
the
such a
most
big deal?
shocking thing that I read today was I I don't even wanna say because it's so shocking. So Artemis 2 is launching tonight.
Oh, we forgot about that in the current event snapshot, didn't we? Yes.
So the Free Press posted an article about the long-term effects of people, because Artemis 2 is part of the Artemis missions that are trying to eventually put people on a lunar base on a base on the moon, right?
Mhm.
They did an article about space sex. And so they said that the sperm might not be able to find the egg in space. And that was a whole article, is that like when you have sex and like the man ejaculates, that the sperm might not be able to find the egg in zero gravity. And I want to know how they think they know that.
I mean, did astronauts have sex in space?
That's what I want to know, is why do they
Oh,
know this?
that sounds like Heated Rivalry Space Edition.
I just want to know how they think they know that the sperm can't find the egg. And
It was a
I said,
dalliance on the International Space Station.
I was just like kind of grossed out. And also, like, why are we talking about this now?
All we want is free healthcare. What do we do?
Why are we talking about spreading the population to space?
Like, we barely can take care of this rock that we're on.
But I was like, so I read the headline and I was like shocked about it. And then I read the article and I was more shocked.
So that was in a situation where the shock was just all the way through, not just the headline. Sometimes that happens, right?
Well, and the pictures on the article were like the kicker because it showed like a picture of like a sperm hitting the egg.
Oh, what is our next question? What do we got?
Is it okay to ever look at social media and talk to AI sources ever?
Well, it depends on the school of thought. I think it's okay to look at social media for source because like a lot of like outlets do use social media to share information. But I just think on social media you have to remain extra vigilant. Do I trust AI sources?
So the thing with
Mm,
Claude that they've been doing, the anthropological AI, is that it uses the internet to search for its sources. So
mhm,
like I'll ask for news updates from Claude and it'll give me like a list of like, because that's the thing with ChatGPT is trained on the internet, but it doesn't have access to the internet.
mhm.
But
Yeah,
Claude does have access to the internet and it updates automatically. So I'll ask for like, what's the latest headlines? And it'll search the web and it'll get me like a look. We're excited, like
mhm.
where it got those articles so I can look up the articles, but it'll give me like a list of headlines with
Interesting.
information, but it'll link the articles.
Interesting. Yeah, so see, like, I think there are applications for it, right? Like, there are I think there are more reputable spaces to do so, like Claude, right? As opposed to just, like, a lot of, like, AI that's embedded in social media itself.
I think Claude is getting better about using verifying sources and like being more like a Wikipedia that
Mhm.
is like trained on AI. But
Yeah,
I mean, AI isn't great. Like AI
yeah,
still hallucinates and does really
yeah.
bad stuff.
It still hallucinates, there's still, like, the environmental factor for sure, right?
Mhm.
The impact on like creative output in general. So now, like, we're at some point, everyone probably going to do a part two to our AI episode that we did. Was it last season? A couple of
Yeah, it was
seasons ago?
two
Something to
seasons
that effect.
ago.
Yeah, it's been a while ago. So, the next question, like, how do we vet sources across social media and unpack? Well, we already kind of talked about that, right? We vet the sources by understanding like the media bias. We vet the sources by like looking at where it's published, who it's published by, when it was published. Case in point, I did have an aunt, seems to be an aunt thing, share an article about like someone's death, and like my aunt's caption at the top was just like reacting to it as though it was happening at that moment. And I responded, and I looked at the article and I was just like, Aunt Susie Q, this happened in like 2017. Like,
My mom will share recipes off Facebook and I'll be like, "Mom, this is AI."
oh no. No, I do like I've literally done that with my parents too before. Like they've sent me like reels. Like they sent me like this reel of like a fat cat sitting on like a wheelchair lift, like sitting like a human. And
Uh-huh.
I looked down at the bottom the username and it said AI cat or AI kitty cat. And I was just like, you guys, this is not real. And they were like, boo, I don't care. It was funny. I'm like, Jesus Christ. So,
Slop. You're looking at slop.
oh my God. It's brain rot. It's kind of brain rot. Like, we could have a whole episode about brain rot itself.
Yeah.
What does that look like, right? So,
Sometimes I look at brain rot with Girl World.
Oh, I sometimes look at brain rot too. I watch reality TV, like that is live action brain rot.
But I watch like edited brain rot. So I watch like clips of like videos of like Girl World, and then they'll edit in like brain rot clips. Like Vines and stuff like that.
Oh, Vines. What a throwback, right?
Or like TikToks and stuff like that.
Yeah. So we do have a few more questions. So I did want to pose the question of like, well, how do we teach media literacy in college? So like I did mention a few other tidbits, and Ari mentioned their background in journalism, especially, and the literary theory experience. So like in a lot of my composition classes, so like I teach like the entry level composition classes where students come in, they have to take like this gen ed class that garners them their writing credit, right? So in composition classes, not only am I teaching them how to write, but I'm also teaching them how to research, how to edit, how to vet sources. And one of the first means of doing so is like teaching them the rhetorical situation. So the rhetorical situation is this understanding that there is a relationship between speaker and audience, and understanding like in order to break down and develop some sense of what the source is discussing, you have to understand that relationship between speaker and audience, right? And there are a variety of smaller tools that you can learn associated with that helps you develop context. I won't go into that here because that's a lot of stuff. But understanding the relationship between speaker and audience is probably one of the most important things, especially when we think about like the motivation of the speaker and like the intent of the message, right? However, the other thing that I do teach that I think this is going to be a tool I would like to say is pretty accessible to everyone. I like to teach active reading strategies because I think active reading can really go far in helping people develop a sense of media literacy. Because again, like I was saying earlier, we are inundated with so much information that we skim and we don't take an opportunity to actually deep read something. Have you experienced this, Ari? I know I experience it all the time.
So yeah, so doing deep reading strategies. So sometimes what I'll do is I'll even print out sources, and I'll start doing like but I don't have a printer, so I'll have to take it to the library. Like I'll save it to a PDF, and then I'll take it to the library and I'll print it off. And so there's a cost efficiency to it.
Do you like annotate it when you print it off and like write notes?
I do. Yeah, I do. Mm-hmm.
I love note taking. Note taking is so fun. So I have go ahead.
I have a commonplace book too. Sometimes I'll put quotes in there and stuff from like news articles or like books and stuff like that, because that's the thing. Like if you're reading something and it's making you think, sometimes there's like, you'll refer back to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that kind of helps build a wealth of knowledge, right? So when it comes to one way to develop media literacy through active reading, I like to show everyone this active reading strategy. It's called the SQ3R method. So this method asks readers to survey, question, read, recite, and review a text or a source, right? So when it asks you to begin the process by reading, it asks you to obtain a general understanding of a chapter or an article by skimming the titles, the headings, the pictures, the graphs, phrases, summaries. This helps you kind of gain like a general idea of the breadth of the topic. This is what gives people the excuse to skim and get the skimming out of the way first, right? Because you can kind of gain a rudimentary understanding of something by skimming it, which is a good way to begin, right? But don't end it there. The next step is questioning. So questioning asks you to think about what you already know about the topic and then form questions about the information that you may want to know. So I often will have people look at a source and be like, my God, I don't know where to begin. Like Professor Winter, like, where do I begin? Like, I don't even know how to interpret this. The first analysis questions that I think are crucial is what, where, when, why, how, who, like those questions. Like, who was it written by? Who was it written for? Why was it written? What is the motivation behind it? What is the message, right? When was it published? Like questions like that. Because those will at least help you begin to kind of flesh out the process a little bit more. Once you develop those questions, then you take your deep dive and you do your deep read. And you, like, when people go into a reading with a goal, they tend to really stick more so to the reading, right? Because we know with the way we are now with our attention spans being shortened, we read in much shorter stints. So when you go into reading with a motivation, being answering those questions, you learn the general idea of each major section in that chapter, ideally, or in whatever source it is. The next step is recite. So you then, try to put the new information you learn into your own words. You take notes. If you struggle to put them into your own words, that means you probably should start over with the questioning part of the process, right? And then last but not least, you review, you reflect on those learning experiences. For the review portion, I tell people, maybe put it away for a while and come back to it later, like you were just talking about, Ari, like bookmarking the article, come back to it later. Maybe you'll have a renewed understanding of what you've read as a result. Thank you for attending my TED Talk.
That's what I've been doing with like the Iran war, is that I wrote an essay about the New York Times articles that I had been reading in relation to like the Iraq war historically. I wrote a whole essay related to the historical information. Like I did research based on it about how they were covering the Iraq war. And I wrote like a personal essay about like what I knew about the Iraq war and like what was was published about the Iraq war. And then I used
the Iraq war, or the Iran war.
So historically, the Iraq war.
Okay.
And then I did context with news articles that I had read recently about the Iran war.
Oh, okay.
So I was doing like a retrospective, like how the two compared.
Right. And what was the rhetoric surrounding both?
Yeah, it's up on Patreon.
I'm gonna have to go read that. I am one of Ari's Patreon subscribers, everyone. So you should definitely not to do a shameless self promotion, for Ari, but go subscribe to Ari's Patreon. Like,
it's only $1.
It's only $1, and it's great stuff. You get early access to videos. You get to read really cool articles like that. So now, if you're questioning a source, how should you verify information? And if it's not being covered by the major corporations.
So usually, this would happen to me with the cream cheese baby thing. Like they were not talking about so this was before they had started doing research about it or done an article about it. And I was like, I was cycling, I was spiraling. So if you do not have information based on what is out there, you can do, a certain amount of research. So like I was looking directly at the Epstein files and doing my own research based on what I had found out. So I looked directly at the Epstein files and I was looking directly at the source and doing my own research that way. You can look at sources of the source material. Government puts out a lot of paperwork about, you can look, like if the government is not talking about the contents of like legislation or things like that, you can look directly at the legislation and see directly what the words in the legislation are. You can call the offices of these senators or congressmen and ask questions and say, I just want to know this information. Can you give me a quote, or can you just answer this question for me? And maybe they'll get back to you and you can find out information and just find out what the party line is.
Yeah. Yeah, the thing is, like, it's all about, like, taking that action, right? And taking those steps. It's very possible to do it, and I don't think that enough people take advantage of that ability, right? So, well, we do have one final question. What is the benefit of media literacy, and how does it improve the world that we live in?
So, being more media literate means that you are going to be more well informed about what the truth is. And honestly, what is the benefit of knowing the truth?
The benefit of knowing the truth is understanding, well, what's actually happening in the real world that we're living and breathing in, knowing how it impacts people, right? Knowing how it might impact you, and understanding that, maybe you're not being impacted, but there could be those who are impacted by whatever the truth is.
Or that you're not being taken advantage of?
Yeah, absolutely. I do think that now of all times, media literacy can help us chart a course for the future in creating stronger community, right? Because like only in a fragmented community does this much misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation thrive, right? So I think I really do think that you are doing yourself justice by developing media literacy skills because those skills right now I feel like are in some instances difficult to develop in this chaotic world that we're living in.
A lot of a lot of disinformation or malinformation does set to pit us against each other. It
Hmm.
really sets to make you feel alone. It makes to set you feel as though that you are, especially like the conspiracy theories, it makes you feel as though you've gone crazy in a world that is
Yeah.
desensitized, or that they are like not on the safe wavelength as you, that you have some access to some secret information that they don't have, that you
Yeah.
are on some higher level of consciousness that they just don't have. And the case is that not that that's not usually the case, that most people are at least somewhat informed about what's going on in the world.
Right. Right. I think that was an excellent way to conclude. So, like, just some general parting words, believe in yourself, believe in your ability to develop media literacy as a skill. And I think you will quickly realize that it is going to be very helpful. Any final words from you before we wrap up?
Subscribe to a dang newspaper.
Yeah. Or go to a library. Libraries are lovely.
And you don't even have to go to a library. Just get a library card, and they have the Libby app, which you can get so many magazines and newspapers for free.
Love that. Accessible, right? So, everyone, thank you for listening to our show as always. Don't forget, you can also listen to our show on streaming services. And you will be excited to know that we will have an entire trilogy of episodes examining, what is it? What is the trilogy of
Political
episodes?
theory. Political
The political theory, like throughout segments of history. So like, and it will tie into our conversation here about media literacy. So thank you everyone for listening. Subscribe to our channels, click like for that algorithm, and know that we love you. Have a good rest of your night. Bye.
Bye.